Next up, Niamh Bushnell from techireland.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Owen. Thanks for having me here. I got a lift up to Cong with Natalia there in the back, and her lovely boyfriend here in the front, who's going to be talking to her later on, Alexandra. So I didn't get a chance to read and prep my speech. I did write it myself, but I can't remember any of it. So what I'm going to do is maybe read it every now and then. I never use slides because they're too distracting, so let's see how not distracting this piece of paper is.
Take mine away.
Yeah. So I was actually I had 3 friends over from the States last weekend, and we were in the Guinness Storehouse, and I have to say, I was really impressed with, has anybody been in the Guinness Storehouse? I'm sure, I mean, as an Irish person, I'd never been there, but it's so coolly designed, it's so cool. I was so impressed because I really didn't want to go, and these Americans were dragging me, kicking and screaming in there, but I came out having tried a couple of different porters that they're now selling that I didn't like, but I don't like Guinness anyway, so I guess that wasn't a good start. So as Owen said, I am going to talk about innovation, connection as innovation. And it's really based on a theme that's coming up a lot for me in my work at the moment. And it's more questions that I have than answers to it. And I thought, since I'm going to be in the middle of the country in Mayo, you guys, and I know you're not all from here, I know there's people from all over the country here, but it's a good audience to kind of have this discussion with. So maybe it's a little provocative, and maybe people have really strong thoughts about it, but that's what I'm here to hear. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things, give you a couple of anecdotes, and then hopefully I'll hear back a lot. But actually what David was saying there about innovation being what's in front of you, that's kind of a core piece to what I'm talking about with connection. So, you know, if you believe that innovation is not about creating something brand new, but about connecting the dots between things that are either right in front of you or that don't seem to have a connection, but you make that connection between them, that's when real innovation happens. And that's what I'm worried about is not happening a lot in Ireland. So I'll step back for a second and explain some context for what I'm going to talk about, which is that, so I lived in the States for 16 years. I came back in 2014. In October 2014, I took a job here in Dublin, here in Ireland, in Dublin as the first Dublin Commissioner for Startups. There hasn't been a second one appointed, unfortunately, but hopefully that's something that will happen down the line. And the Commissioner for Startups, Dublin Commissioner for Startups, as it sounds, the focus of the role was, the title of the role at least, was startups, and so the focus, I guess, was startups, but it became really clear to me very early on in the role that we couldn't tell the story of Dublin internationally as just a startup story, because every city has startups, every city has people, every city has all this stuff going on, and there's nothing differentiating about that. So what Dublin had that other cities pretty much anywhere in the world didn't have was multinationals and startups that were cheek by jowl, sitting beside each other all over the city and all over the country indeed. So very quickly, even though the title obviously remained the same, Dublin Commissioner for Startups, the story that we were telling and the story that I was telling internationally about Dublin was the story of Dublin as a tech city. That was a much better title, but we weren't going to go back to the end of the, to the start and redo everything. It's like, okay, the Dublin Commissioner for Startups talks about Dublin as a tech city, as an internationally viable, rateable, pay attentionable to tech city. So that was that part sorted. Then the other part was the Dublin part, so Dublin Commissioner for Startups. And I realized, I had lived in the States for so long. I mean, I'm Irish and I went there in my 20s. But when I came home, one of the things that struck me, and it took a while for it to strike me properly and the impact of it to really strike me, was the scale of Ireland and the scale of Dublin and how damn small we were. That didn't mean we weren't great, it didn't mean we weren't deep, it didn't mean we didn't have potential, but we were so small. And talking about innovation and tech in the city of Dublin, and that, and not talking therefore about fintech companies in Galway or AI companies in Mayo. Urban Fox is a great artificial intelligence company based right here in Mayo, or whatever, in other parts of the country, medical devices, whatever it was. If we couldn't tell a full story, I mean, Ireland is, it is population-wise, it's half the size of New Jersey. And if we were telling a story about, with any kind of scale, and really when you talk about innovation and you're trying to attract in journalists and you're trying to attract in investors and you're trying to attract in talent, they need to know that they're coming in for more than one company or one job interview or one story. They're coming because there's a cluster, there's a depth, there's a number of companies that are going to be interesting. And talking about Ireland brings that story to life rather than just talking about Dublin. Obviously Dublin is the capital city, it's the centre, it's where the density happens. But telling a story of fintech, for example, the biggest fintech company in the country is in Kerry, Fexco. And that's important to the story of fintech in Ireland and fintech in Dublin. So, you know, I started kind of moving away, not so much moving away from the story of Dublin, because again, you have to have an anchor city and people know Dublin, and people get Dublin internationally. So, and everybody loves Dublin, you know. It's kind of a funny thing when you ask people, especially in the States, you know, why do you love Dublin? They go, I don't know, but Dublin just sounds like a great place. I'd love to go to Dublin. So it has that very positive, strong brand association, kind of like Guinness, I guess, that people associate with. But the story had to be, for me, a story of the whole country. So, you know, that was what we did, and so that was the story that we told, and I think it worked out pretty well for the 2.5 years that story was happening through the office and through that role. At the start of April this year, I moved out of the commissioner role we took out one of the projects of the office called Tech Ireland, and we made it its own non-profit, and that's what I'm running right now. And Tech Ireland is fixing one of the problems that I had as the Commissioner for Startups, which was we had no data. So here I was trying to attract in all of these journalists and all of these VCs, and then when they'd ask me a question about data, it's like, okay, Niamh, so you say AI is big in Ireland, so how many AI companies are they, and where exactly are they based, you know, I never had, and I knew that data existed around the houses, but I didn't have it in any place where I could actually serve it up and be very confident about presenting it. So it happened to me over and over again that I'd be pitching with anecdote after anecdote after anecdote to an investor or to the Financial Times. I remember one time being on the phone to this guy in the Financial Times, and he seemed to be really getting my pitch on Dublin, and all of a sudden he asked me this question, okay, so give me 5 companies that have raised over 5 million in the last 6 months in Dublin. And I'm like, okay, put you on pause for about 4 hours while I go and like get some of my team to like run around the place and try and pull out that information. So Tech Ireland was set up to solve that problem. And the point, so, and just to kind of, so that you understand, because I think people, I haven't done a good job of explaining Tech Ireland yet, but one of these days I think it'll be clearer to communicate. Tech Ireland is 7 people right now, and what we do is we have a live public database of every product innovation company in the country. And we're currently tracking over 1,600 of them. So product-based companies built in Ireland. We also track multinationals, but our focus is these Irish product companies in Ireland. And so we have 4 full-time data managers. So 4 people whose job it is all day long, every day, to research companies, update companies, get in touch with companies, and have those profiles up to date. So every single week we update 300 companies on Tech Ireland. So if you ever go on to techireland.org, what you're seeing is an absolutely live database of information about Irish product innovation. So if you ever want to check it out, I recommend it, of course. So the reason why I'm talking about Tech Ireland is because when I was the Commissioner for Startups, most of my role was outward focused, right? So I was traveling and I was, you know, trying to speak at conferences and trying to tell that story, and I had a PR agency, and they were, helping me to connect with all these international journalists and all that kind of good stuff. So that was kind of an international focus. With Tech Ireland, I'm much more focused on Ireland, certainly at the moment, because we're still kind of in that gathering stage, and that means I'm traveling around the country a lot, right? So what I'm finding when I travel around the country a lot, I was in Sligo recently, I was in Waterford, I'm here, I'm often down in Cork, I've gone down and talked to people in Kerry, and I love it, and I love Ireland, and it's, I'm so happy that I was able to come home and get a job and, and live here again after so long being abroad. So I love traveling around the country, but what Tech Ireland is trying to do is connect the dots between companies and innovation around the country. But when I go around the country and I talk to people, what I hear is disconnection, not connection. So, and it happens all the time. And like with my kind of American, but we're so small, what do you mean hat on? It's kind of like, why is this disconnection so strongly felt. Why do we act in silos all the time? What do you mean you're in Sligo and you feel like you're being left behind? Dublin is 2 hours down the road, and they can come to you and you can come to them, and you can spend a day there a week, or you can, it's relatively speaking, if we were in New Jersey or in Pennsylvania or in New York, that would be your commute to work maybe, and you would be absolutely connected back and forth between those places. Whereas here we seem to have very different mentalities, and instead of connecting the dots and having this big picture thinking where we can be really innovative, the conversations that I hear are much more about protecting a local environment and branding a local environment to be separate from the centre, and to be and for Dublin, for example, to be something that you need to be concerned about as opposed to connecting into. And that's a real problem for Ireland in my book. And it makes me, I was talking to my husband about this morning, and he's like, he's American, so like this is a kind of an interesting conversation for him. And he's like, so what's the solution? I'm like, I don't know what the solution is, but Tech Ireland is at least doing a mapping of all of the product innovation, so that from now on, if you choose to use Tech Ireland, you won't be a tech company sitting up in Donegal not knowing that there's a tech company doing something very similar to you in some other part of the country. You won't be a multinational in Limerick wondering if there's any emerging technology companies in the area that you can, pilot with, or that you can support. You won't be an investor kind of wondering what's going on around you. I mean, you can literally go on to Tech Ireland, and the way Cork has this issue where it's the digital donut, so all the companies in Cork are all around the edges of the city as opposed to being in the city centre. So Tech Ireland solves that, so you can actually know, instead of figuring out as you drive past like who are all the companies in that building, you can actually go into Tech Ireland and see on a map all of the companies. So it's a meet your neighbour, you can use it as a meet your neighbour thing. So it maps every product company in the country, the technologies that they're using, everything about them, their funding, their founders, everything about them. But I'm kind of wondering, because of the mentality that we have, are we going to use it like that? I mean, we're going to use it for loads of other things, to draw in the investors and to do all the other stuff that we used to do before. But are we going to use a tool like Tech Ireland to enable us to make connections here in Ireland between people who need to be connected? Because actually, to make innovation happen, we need to make those connections instead of having people doing similar activities and not understanding the skill sets and the networks that people very close by to them actually have. And instead of focusing in, we need to focus out. And I have a kind of a great anecdote about this. I went to the States with Enterprise Ireland in 1998 and worked for them for 6 years, and then I worked for an Irish company called Orbiscom that was bought by MasterCard, a payments company, really cool Irish company. And after that, I set up my own consulting business, kind of a la Tech Ireland, but on a private basis. So I would help Irish companies come into the States and companies from other places as well. And I had this kind of, consultancy thing that I sold, which was that I would develop your town hall for you. And so clients would say, okay, so what's a town hall? I said, well, a town hall is not just me mapping for you who your primary customers are in the States or on the East Coast, really, because I was East Coast focused, in the East Coast, and who your primary competitors are here. It'll also map all of the companies upstream and downstream from the technology that you have. So let's say the service providers in your industry, the professional service providers, the law firms are very specialist in the States, the law firms in your industry, the lobbying groups in Washington who focus on what you're doing, the trade associations. So you'll have this full picture of everybody at a high level, of everybody, all the players in your market in the States. You will know at a high level who all of those are, because you can get different things from different members of that group. For the Irish companies that I worked for, I also had to include another element in the town hall, and that was the Irish people that you should have contacted before you came over here in the first place. What the hell? Because people wouldn't connect with companies that were in their industry right here. And I would be connecting people who had flown to the States to do work over there back into people in Ireland who had loads of networks in the States and who were a couple of years ahead of them in terms of what they were doing over there, but they would never bother connecting with them. No, we got to go to the States. Instead of making that happen here, they would jump across the pond And I would make those connections back to them in Ireland, which I thought was just so ridiculous, and now I kind of understand more about why that happens. So that's the thrust of what I wanted to talk about, and let me just see if there's anything in particular that I'm missing out here. Just one final thing. So recently I've been helping to do some research on innovation districts, and an innovation district is where you have a massive density of companies of different types from different sectors of different sizes, all working in a very tight environment. Let's say 1 square mile. So you might have, you might have thousands of people, like 15,000 people maybe working. They'll be working for different companies, and the whole idea, the research that we will or we won't pay attention to, from everything that I've looked at, says that where you have a density of people, you will get more innovation, because the unplanned encounters and the collaborations that happen out of that, the serendipity that comes out of that, is what creates innovation, because that's connecting the dots in surprising and new ways, right? Steve Jobs in 1999 took over Pixar, and he built a whole new building for them. And the story behind the new Pixar building was that he wanted there to be this big atrium in the middle of it, this massive open space in the middle of the office. And all of the offices then, for all the different parts, there was 1,000 people going into this building, were all around the place. And he insisted that this massive open space was in the middle of it to force people to encounter each other in the open space, talk to each other and learn from each other. And the urban myth, and I'm sure it's probably true actually, was that he wanted all the bathrooms to be like in one spot for the 1,000 people all at the back, so they would definitely, if they didn't come into the atrium, they would have to meet each other in the bathrooms. The architects, I think, said no to that, and they managed to get bathrooms around the place. But that idea of having to create a space where people can connect with each other and are forced to connect with each other is very powerful to me. And I have a quote in here that I won't. Let me just read it out actually, because it's Steve Jobs, and I think it just kind of encapsulates the whole. Okay, he says, if a building doesn't encourage collaboration, you lose a lot of innovation and the magic that's sparked by serendipity. So we designed a building to make people get out of their offices and mingle in the central atrium with people they might not otherwise see. And for me, that's kind of the crux of what our ability is in a small, agile, relatively well-connected country like Ireland, is to do that. And if you lose innovation in a building by not having those connections and coming to the centre, imagine what we're losing as a country by not being more connected between the regions and the centre. And it's worked for us up until now, having multinationals coming in and the tax breaks. That's gone. That future, that's not the future. The future is connecting talent and collaboration and data and big ideas. And that's what we need to do. I'll leave you with one final thought on it, which is, I was moderating a panel in Dublin a couple of weeks ago, and there was a guy on the panel from Veolia, which is, Veolia is, you guys might know, it's a huge company. I think they're French, but they're an environment services company. So they do a lot of, energy stuff, right? And so I'm moderating the panel, and this Irish guy sitting on the panel, he just kind of comes out with this, there's loads of, because it was a sharing economy, I forgot to say, it was a sharing economy topic presentation, our panel. And this guy says, yeah, there's loads of sharing economy technologies out there, but we won't be able to implement them in Ireland because people just aren't ready to share in Ireland, so we won't be able to do it here. It's like, oh my God, okay. So, all of these different thoughts around connecting the dots, connecting more with each other, collaboration, and the future of innovation as it comes to our country, which we all care about so much, that's what I'd like to discuss. Thank you.